So this is a Sat song, which means that I want to focus on Sat, on the real, because why focus on anything that isn't real? Although, that's all people do all day. They prefer their fictional narratives to the real. So we have to have special gatherings in which we honor the real, you know. We give a token gesture. Ah, yes, God, I remember. Oh, now let me go back to my worries, you know, and counting my money and, you know, trying to improve my situation and stop being lonely, and, you know, and et cetera, right? Why is it that the real is so unattractive and that fiction is so much preferable to the soul? Well, you know, it's the same with Shiva, frankly. So, because we're all fractals of Shiva. In fact, I think he's actually rather low class. I mean, if you look at where we are in the timeline of the drama right now, you'd have to say this is the moment of the shootout at the OK Corral. Does everyone know that? I had to grow up with Wild West movies, so I probably saw 3 or 4 versions, you know, of that gunfight. But that's where the power blocks have ended up. You know, in a gunfight, before the showdown, you walk, right, toward them and with a very intimidating walk, you know. And then there's a moment or two when you're standing, you know, with your hands shivering with anticipation, and there might be a little talk, maybe a last-minute negotiation, you know. Let's go to the saloon first and have a drink and then come back and do it. No, talk ends very quick, and then it's time to reach for your gun, right? We're at the moment now when the talk is done, right? And each one has walked into its position with its bluff and its bravado, you know, and its red lines and its, oh yeah, try to knock this chip off my shoulder, you know. All of it's reached now the point where each empire, and we are dealing with empires here, not just one. We are dealing with the moment that the archetype of the empire concludes. Okay? The empire strikes back, but the empire strikes back at itself and destroys itself, right? So if we wanted to name them, there's probably too many to list. But, you know, the British Empire is very well known. The French Napoleon is made fun of all the time. The Third or Fourth Reich, whichever we're on, right? This is, you know, quite well known. And the Germanic, you know, kingdoms long ago, not to mention the Nordic runes. And what about, you know, the empires of the Americas? And let's not forget the Ottoman Empire. Versus the kingdom of Judea in this case, you know, and what about the very ancient Iranian, maybe Sasanian Empire, you know, and you know, the Han Dynasty is alive and well, and all of these empires are fighting a war. It's not just the residue of some neo-colonialism. This goes back a long way. In fact, we're talking really about another sedimentary layer of empire that goes back to prehistoric times that is in play, alive and well at a subtle level in this unfoldment. Or even we could say a manifest but a hidden level. So all of that is detail, but the real point is every empire is ancient. It's what they used to call long in the tooth, all right? So none of the empires actually have the strength to win a combat. None of them do. And they know it because their internal structures are crumbling. They are not healthy at a psychological level or even a somatic level, thanks to all the poisoning of the environment, et cetera, and the genetic modifications, et cetera, et cetera. But the empires are exhausted in terms of will, intelligence, and capacity to attune to the Tao, to earn the mandate of heaven. It's lost for all of them. And so, because it's the moment that you either surrender or you go for broke, right? It's one or the other. You can't half shoot in the OK Corral. You know, you can't, I'll scare you into thinking I'm going to reach. No, as soon as you make that first move, the other guy is going to, you can't have any indecision, and you can't bluff it. It's a moment of truth, but not a comfortable truth. But there's no way to back down. An empire cannot back down. It withers away. No empire has ever backed down. They've gone down, but they've gone down fighting and usually take down many others. So we're seeing now the ultimate takedown. And mutual assured destruction, as they say. Mad. It's a madhouse. So because the empire is long in the tooth has cavities. And it's the only thing interesting about the unreal world at that geopolitical level is that because the manifestation is structured fractally, there's a self-similarity going on in the kingdom of every ego. Because the ego is its own empire. And it has its internal slaves and its internal bosses and mafiosi and its internal Epstein Islands and its internal, whatever it is that's your jouissance. So the ego has similar cavities. So here's what I wrote to signify that. So the C of cavities is complexity. And of course, we know when a system becomes too complex, it crashes very easily. But the other aspect that I think is more dominant at the moment, when you have an extremely complex system, is that whatever move you make in that system is going to have unintended consequences. You see? And although each empire believes it is a separate system, all the systems are interwoven, because non-duality is the truth. You know, the black hats and the white hats are interchangeable because they're just mutual projection. Each side thinks the other's wearing the black hat, right? So it's not like there's an objective reality here. But the complexity is always going to produce consequences in areas that could not have been foreseen by the strategists working at a particular level. So an economic move, let's say, of putting a tariff can have an effect of an asymmetric response that cuts off your access to rare earths, right? So this chess game that's being, played out is having consequences that are affecting the functionality of the complexity of the system. I guess I'll write them all down at once for you, so you're not left in suspense. Okay, so complexity, animosity, vulnerability, incompetence, turpitude, indecision or indecisiveness, emergence, meaning emergent properties, and seismic pressures. So the second problem then is that the ego is based on animosity. And its animosity has no limits. It's not simply, the West hates the Russians, and vice versa, perhaps. The Arabs hate the Jews, and vice versa, or whatever. It's not simply that animosity. It's an animosity that hits at every level of envy within each bureaucracy, within each state, corporation, institution, etc. And because of animosity, of course, there can't be trust. And so the system already malfunctions for that reason. Third is the vulnerability of the system, because it has become so dependent on globalism, mass production, the need for highly educated, capable, employees, etc. It can be very easily harmed when conditions affect any of those factors. So the vulnerability to unintended consequences, for example, a run on the U.S. bond market will have immediate effects on the whole functioning of the empire. So then you have incompetence, because the system has deliberately created an incompetent population to protect themselves from people who can think too clearly, who would not fall for the mind control. So they dumbed down the educational system. This was planned decades and decades ago. And the creation and the way, the unfoldment of the internet and Hollywood productions, et cetera, produce exactly the kind of paranoid, psychopathic, and psychotic elements you want to keep your society docile. But then you unfortunately pay the price of a loss of competence. And then, of course, you're dealing with moral turpitude, with the very easy seduction of people by bribery, and the ease of using the honeypot tricks and the cocaine tricks and whatever other jouissance that they need to be able to control, blackmail, keep people reliable, etc. But they will betray the empire at the drop of a hat. So you get intelligence leaks, and you get assassinations and all kinds of phenomena. So then you deal with indecision. And this may be actually the most important one, especially if we deal with the fractal of the human ego. The ego can never be accurately decisive it's always either a step behind or it moves too soon. It's never in the kairos moment. There's a moment that's the precise moment for an action. That window of opportunity does not last very long. And if you end up too late at the level of an empire, you lose the war. Or at least you have maybe millions of more casualties than you might have otherwise. So the indecisiveness is based on the paranoid fears and need to calculate, should I or shouldn't I? And in that moment of trying to figure it out, the moment is lost, right? And so at the ego level, you can never master that capacity to act when it's of the essence. So then, of course, every situation has emergent properties. Those emergent properties could be known at a higher level than the ego, but the ego itself can never know those properties in advance. So it's always going to be taken by surprise. And therefore, it always has to factor in indeterminacy. But a lot of it is not really indeterminate, but it's just not knowable unless you're in a teleological, precognitive vibrational frequency. And then the seismic pressures, and by that I mean both the actual seismic instability of the Earth, which I think everyone can perceive is on the increase, which is not random. It's not an accident. Everything is alive. Nature is very much a player in this game. But also the seismic pressures of the buildup of fury in a population that politicians cannot resist because they'll be overthrown, they'll be assassinated, they'll be whatever, removed. And they have to accede to that wave of power that makes demands that can't be resisted without lethal consequences. So those seismic pressures that are coming from subconscious levels and from levels of fragments of dissociated consciousness will have an influence that is incalculable, but is increasing as we approach the omega point, when everything has to be settled, all karma, right? And so now, if you understand that these processes are going on internally inside each of every character, let's put it this way, they're not going on inside the one playing the character, okay? But they are going on inside the character. So everything in terms of your destiny will depend upon your recognition that you are not the character you are playing. Everything will depend on that, right?